hard to believe that way up in the north of Japan, beyond all this concrete and wires, there are mountains and golden fields waiting for harvest and little thatched houses, and that's where I'm going. Tokyo always thrills me. It's a city in a state of flux, full of drive and building and change. In the 12 years since I first came, it's been transformed into one of the world's most youthful and exciting cities. People from all over Japan come to work and stay to enjoy the money, the neon streets, the noise, exuberance and sheer energy of the place. But for all its brilliance and excitement, Tokyo's not what I've come for. I'm setting off on a quest that for me is much more exciting. Although I've come to love the glitter and neon of the city, it was the sacred side of Japan that first brought me here. I came to study Zen and to write and teach. For years I've been longing to follow the pilgrim's path to the mysterious sacred mountains of the north. And now at last I'm going. I don't know what I'll find, or even if I'll make it. It's going to be a tough journey, and I'll be on my own. But whether or not I get there, it'll also be a journey into myself. For me, the journey will be both a quest and a homecoming. I'm going to visit friends in the north, a part of the country I know well. There's a village there which is the nearest I have to a home in Japan. And then I'll go on to the sacred mountains, where I've never been before. But the place where my journey really begins is Matsushima, Pine Islands. At dawn, the bay is magical. There's a legend that Basho, Japan's great wandering poet, came here 300 years ago and was struck dumb by its beauty. And all he could write was this: Matsushima ya. Ah, Matsushima, Matsushima ya. The waters of the beautiful bay are full of poles strung with nets for growing seaweed. In the past, holy men came here to meditate, inspired by the beauty and serenity of the scene. For this is where the ancient pilgrimage route begins, to the legendary sacred mountains. Pilgrims used to congregate here. Monks and hermits holed up in the small caves on this island and carved the hillside with images and scriptures. The sun's shining and I'm on the road with my pack on my back. Though what I'm doing might look fairly eccentric to Japanese eyes, because hitchhikers are a rare sight in Japan. But with the gods on my side, everything starts out auspiciously. These giant kokeshi dolls mean only one thing. I'm getting closer to the spa town of Narugo, where the most famous ones are made. There's no way you can travel in the north of Japan without stopping off for hot baths along the way. In fact, that's the main reason most people come. And the most famous spa of all is here at Narugo. Sadly, being famous seems to equal being ugly, though I rather like its tacky little streets and plastic maple leaves. But the amazing thing about Narugo is the smell. The whole place is rank with it. It puffs out of the ground in great clouds of steam, the all-pervasive, rotten egg smell of sulfur. By evening, the whole place will be full of holidaymakers, soaking in the big communal baths in the hotels. But even though it's early in the day, I can't resist having a bath right now, in this wonderful mineral water, straight out of the ground. It's hot, very hot. Wakes you up. There's certainly no chance of dozing off when it's as hot as this. Though you have to sit very still. When you move, it scalds. So, well bathed and refreshed, I set off on my way again. And from now on, I'm going to walk. Walking, of course, brings you close to nature. And when you're close to nature, you're close to the Shinto gods. Often they live in the most out-of-the-way places, but always in places which have some feeling of mystery and the sacred. The torii gates are there for anyone to pass through, for the Shinto gods are wonderfully accessible. Everyone, no matter what their faith, may pay their respects and make a request, and the gods will do their best to help you. I asked for a good journey and a safe passage, all the way to the sacred mountains. And I hope my prayer will be answered. Shinto is said to be the earth of Japan. Like the earth, it's always been here. Once upon a time, long before they marked off the sacred places by building shrines, people simply worshipped natural things like rocks and great trees and mountains and waterfalls. And from there came Shinto. But silence and solitude are soon broken when the pilgrim path rejoins the road. There I stop at a roadside stall for a snack. Ever since I first passed this way, I've seen these snakes coiled on sticks. I can't believe people really eat them.
どういうヘビですか？
これね、マムシってやつ。
マムシ。
マムシってよ。この辺でよ。毒のものすごくあるやつね。
そうでしょ。毒じゃない？
んだ。
食べられる？
いや、食べるのはさ好きねだけど、食べるのは毒はね、もう食べれば食用には絶対感じない。
一度だけ食べてみましょう。
これ。
これ。
これダメです。ちょっと待って、まず今。
時間かかる？
そんなに時間かかんねえですよ。この辺心臓の部分だから心臓の部分食べてみてる。
あ、そう。それが一番美味しい。
いや、ここ一番いいあれですよ。心臓味だもん。
あ、
ね。はい。よし、焼きましたのでどうぞ。
はい、ありがとう。熱い？熱くない？
いや、カメ熱い。
そのままで食べる？いい？この辺が美味しい。
あまり噛めない。
Tastes like a bit of old rope. Later, I discovered that it's supposed to be a powerful aphrodisiac. So, fortified by snake, I carry on through this bleak country. In winter, even bleaker, when the snow screens are closed and snow lies 10 foot deep on the ground. I keep going until I reach the little market town of Obanazawa, Pampas Marshes. It's the commercial hub of the whole region. Farmers from the hills all around bring their fruit, like persimmons, to sell, and the vegetables they've grown or picked wild in the mountains. But Obanazawa is also a cultural center, and it's where my friends the haiku poets live. Haiku are jewel-like little poems, just 17 syllables long, which encapsulate the essence of a moment or an experience. It's not difficult to put together 17 syllables, but it's very difficult to write a good haiku, which fulfills all the rules. 3 lines of 5, 7, and 5 syllables, including a word which indicates the season. But one of the best things about haiku writing is that you do it in a group. Poetry parties are a regular event in Obanazawa, and sometimes it seems to me as if everyone in Obanazawa no matter what their profession, is also a poet. Mariko is a dancer. Umetsu, the leader of our group, is a school teacher and professional poet. Nishizuka runs a cake shop. And as for me, I'm the duffer of the group, poring over my dictionary. Autumn mists and the faint warmth of red persimmons.
説明しよう。だから今年ね、霧とか雲とかばっかりでしょ。だから太陽は全然ない。でも今日ね、店に行ったら柿があったからね、その柿は太陽の代わりにね、暑い感じだった。
ほんのり暑でしょうね。
あ、暑さじゃなくて。
暑さは温度になっちゃう。
あ、そう。
温度に天変温度になっちゃう。
全体のね。
じゃあ暑い。
秋でね。暑いってところは夏なんだけどね。
あ、暑いは夏のことか。
夏。
赤木。
木。
の。じゃあこれです。
はい。
柿一つ。
A single persimmon faintly red. Autumn mists.
柿一つ、ほんのり赤き秋の霧、たくさんなります。たくさんなった感謝に一つか二つ柿を残す。だから日本では作物が出ると、天に感謝する。そういう意味で大変これがいい。そこにレズリーのほんのりっていうのはやっぱり女性だから非常になかなかいいと思います。
あ、そう。ほんのりっていう言葉は、
ほんのりっていうのはなんとなくね女性らしいと。赤きっていうのはこれね、赤き秋のだから少し季語が少しダブってるようですけども、私はこの柿一つがね、日本の心、日本人の優しさとかね、そんな感じでいいと思います。
A single persimmon, faintly red, autumn mists. Luckily this morning there are no autumn mists, though autumn is in the air. The first time I took this road, 4 years ago, it was just a narrow track, all overgrown. And even last year, it was only wide enough for one car. I'm heading deep into the mountains now, to the valley which I love best in all of Japan. For a moment, I was afraid that the valley too would have changed. But luckily it hasn't. It still looks as beautiful as ever. Arriving here is like a homecoming for me. Everything is wonderfully familiar. Up in the mountains, they're only just beginning the harvest. Everyone here has been growing rice for centuries, though it's not much of a way of making a living. By the time they've taken out enough for their own needs, there's precious little left to sell. Year in, year out, after the harvest, they stack the poles like wigwams, and soon they'll build them into racks to dry this year's rice on. The village here is called Yamanouchi, inside the mountain. And that's exactly what it is, enclosed all around by hills. The family I stay with are the Inoues. Though actually that doesn't tell you very much, because except for one family, everyone in the village is called either Inoue or Kuranuma. Not that they're all related. Until a few centuries ago, when the shogun decided they needed them, country people had no surnames. But it's this family that I've come back to see. The first thing, of course, is to catch up on the latest gossip. Who's got married, who's had a baby, and the perennial question, have I married yet? And if not, why not? There's one young man in the village who's still not married, And Auntie thinks that I should come here as his bride. In the daytime, the old ladies rule the roost. The young folk are all out at work, and the grannies stay home to take care of the babies. Every house in the village is a family house, with grandparents, parents and children all living together. And in this family, Great Granny lives here too. Every night, Mr. Matsui chants for the souls of the village dead. He's the village priest and the village sage, and the keeper of the Buddhist temple, and is much respected. He is also the only person whose name is not either Inoue or Kurunuma. Every single family in the village has a shrine here in this temple, housing the spirits of the entire family for generations back. For most people here, Buddhism is basically to do with death. The older you get, the more devout you become. Old people pray to the Buddhas for a peaceful death and a happy rebirth. And when they die, it's the Buddhist priest who conducts the funeral. Like everyone else, the Inoues who I'm staying with have a shrine here. They also have a larger, grander one in the house. And before every meal, Grandad makes an offering and says a prayer.
상가인 분가샤그 쇼도샤그 가이윤신 제저근인 샤그 쇼도사그가 공가이사이 상기 상지가이분 남무기에부터 남무기에부터 남무기에서 남무기에부터 조성지소 요즘 묘는 호약세만 없구나 가공쇼지젠간 진송거쇼.
Mealtime is always a party here, when the whole family gets together. And many of the dishes are mountain vegetables, which they've gathered themselves, like wild mushrooms and akebi. There's also no escaping sake. Even if your glass is already full, that's no excuse for not having a bit more. And then, of course, you have to return the courtesy. In theory, you never fill your own glass. Though as the evening wears on, Grandad is liable to forget this particular custom. Granny is definitely the ruler of the household. And she's also, as she says herself, the champion mushroom collector of the entire village. At the crack of dawn, before the kids go to school, she's up and off to the woods. How far do we have to go, I ask. Not far, she says, plunging into the undergrowth. Mushrooms come up here and there, and we have to go and look for them. The mountains are her larder. From August to October, every single morning, she's out here mushroom hunting. And come spring, she's back in these same hills, picking wild vegetables. There are mushrooms here that no one in Tokyo has ever heard of, so many that Granny supplies the entire village. Daisuke always comes along. For him, the mountains hold other fascinations. Things have changed a lot since Granny first went mushroom hunting as a young girl. One of her favorite stories is of how she came to marry Grandad. For her, there was none of the luxury of an arranged marriage, let alone marrying for love. Hers and Grandad's families are relatives. They've intermarried for generations. And when she reached marriageable age, she was bundled off down to the big house to marry her cousin. As simple as that. There was no saying yay or nay. Though as it happened, she ended up with a good man. Grandad is a handsome, genial man. He's long since given up being the head of the household and taken a back seat. He leaves the running of the family businesses to his son, young Toshimasa, while he gets on with the practical jobs. He's a master of the old skills, like reed cutting, to make thatch and the protective screens which are put around houses when it snows. And, for the time being at least, there's still enough reed needed for thatch to make his work worthwhile. In Grandad's day, you could make a living by the old skills alone, but not anymore. Most of the time these days, Grandad works in the family shoe factory, in a shed in the garden. The shoe factory was his son's idea. It's a thriving industry and has provided work for quite a few of the village women. Emiko, the young wife of the family, works here too. It's 12 years now since she came as a bride, though her marriage was altogether more romantic than Granny's. Unlike many young girls nowadays, who disappear to Tokyo to be the wife of an office worker, she was happy to marry a farmer. She was working in a nearby town when she met Toshimasa, and they married for love. Yuta-kun is the youngest of the 3 children, and the odds are slim that by the time he grows up, he'll still be living here in the village. Like young people all over Japan, he'll probably be packing his bags and moving down to Tokyo as soon as he can to look for a well-paid job. Daisuke and Akane both go to the village school. 30 years ago, there were 190 children in the school. Now there are only 37. The population of the village has declined so much, the parents had to fight to save the school. Of these children, probably only the eldest sons will continue to live in the village when they grow up, for they'll inherit the house and land. So Daisuke's future is assured, if he wants to stay, that is. As for Akane, the chances are slim that she'll stay here and be a farmer's wife. But in spite of all these changes, the children still learn traditional arts, like playing the taiko, the great drum. Grasshoppers are actually quite nice. Little bit sweet, little bit salty, though you have to watch out not to get the legs caught in your teeth.
稲刈りはどう、年松さん。まだやってない。
まだやってね。
やってない。明日すると思う。
明日さ、ちょっと仕事大巻きの子までさ、ちょっと忙しい仕事入ってね。だから日曜日ね。
Toshimasa calls himself a Sunday farmer. He's the village success story. Like all the bright young men, he went off to Tokyo for a few years to sow his wild oats. But when his father began to get old, Like a good eldest son, he came back to the village to run the family house and till the family fields. But now, as much as I'd love to see the end of the harvest, it's time for me to move on.
じゃあまた来年来る。はい、どうもどうも。はい、どうも。じゃあどうもありがとう。あ、ばあさんどうもありがとう。じゃあ来年来るね。来年の冬。じゃあね。
It's a long time now since I left Tokyo. It's a bittersweet feeling leaving the village. I love the people here so much. They're like my own family. But from here on, I'm on my own, walking a road I've never walked before. This is the road that leads out of the far end of the village. With any luck, if I understood the villagers right, I'll eventually reach the river and be back on the pilgrimage route, well on my way to the sacred mountains. Right now I'm heading higher and higher into the hills. The sheer beauty of the landscape is for me echoed in the words of the haiku poets. Tombo ya, toritsuki kaneshi kusa no ue. Dragonfly, trying in vain to land on a blade of grass. It's been a 5-hour plod so far, quite long enough for one day. Down in the valley, there's a village where the harvest has just started. I hope there's an inn or somewhere else I can stay. In the olden days, travellers would just knock on a stranger's door and ask for a bed for the night. I really hope I don't have to do that. I can't think of anything more embarrassing. But if necessary, I will. Luckily, I've chanced on someone kind-hearted. Can I eat Japanese food, she asks. And when I say yes, she says I can stay. Next morning, everyone's up bright and early, working in the fields. By the time I get up, they're half finished. Each generation has their chosen method of harvesting, and everyone in the family, from the oldest to the youngest, joins in. Hanging the rice out to dry like this, in the old way, Uncle tells me, makes it a lot tastier than cutting it with a combine and drying it in a furnace. But these days, lots of the old ways are under threat. At the moment, the government supports the farmers with massive subsidies and refuses to import American rice, which would cost the Japanese housewife a lot less. If this system comes to an end, it won't be worth growing rice any longer. The rice fields will disappear, and the whole face of the Japanese landscape will change. Here on the mighty Mogami, boatmen have been singing the same river ballads for centuries. Once upon a time, rice barges plied their way up and down this great river, carrying northern rice and safflower to the cities of central Japan. For pilgrims, this was the only way through the rugged mountain ranges. At last, I crossed the threshold to the sacred mountains, through the great gateway which marks the point of transition. from the world of everyday life to the world of the sacred. This is where I begin the hardest part of my journey, the Shu Shrine at the foot of Mount Haguro, the first of the 3 sacred mountains that I am to climb. It's a daunting prospect. I've come a long way, and I have a long way to go, all on foot. So it seems sensible to ask the gods to take care of me and my feet. I pray for a good journey and a good life, plus my name and address, to make sure the gods can find me. Pilgrims used to bathe under the sacred waterfall to purify themselves before they went any further, but I think I'll pass. It looks a bit chilly to me. Mount Haguro is not just a mountain. I'm surrounded by reminders that I've crossed into another world. I'm walking through a landscape of shrines and temples and sacred things. Rocks, tombstones, strange otherworldly images, all with some hidden significance which I have yet to fathom. It's impossible to forget that this is holy ground. It's almost as if the whole mountain were one enormous natural temple. Kono sugi no mibaese shiyoya, kami no aki. In that age, this cedar was a seedling, autumn of the gods. It seems right to pay my respects to all these ancient gods. From here on, I have a long, hard climb ahead of me. 2,446 stone steps to the top of this mountain, and that's only the beginning. Mount Haguro is the gateway to the 3 mountains, the lowest and the most accessible. You can climb it all year round, even in the depths of winter, though there's certainly no one around today. The challenge is to climb the second, a much more forbidding prospect. It's a tough climb, make the long climb up the mountain. But the important thing is not how you get here, but to come and to worship. I certainly wasn't expecting all this noise and bustle. But I suppose it is the holiest place in the whole of northern Japan, so it's hardly surprising. Pilgrims always stay at the Pilgrim Hall, at the top of Mount Haguro, though at this time of year it's deserted. It's way too late in the year, and way too cold, for all but the most foolhardy to think of climbing the second mountain, Gassan. As soon as I wake up, the first thing I want to know is what the weather's like, and if I'll be able to climb Gassan today. I'm disappointed and relieved at the same time. The top of the mountain is still clouded over, and Gassan is far too wild to climb unless it's really clear. It's been an eerie feeling sleeping here all alone. At the height of the pilgrim season, in July, there'd be 63 people sleeping in this room, all squashed together, one per mat. They'd be eating in here too, clattering their dishes, knocking back sake, making a racket. But as it is, I savor my meal all by myself. Somehow, in this land where everyone travels in groups, I always seem to be on my own. But the food's great. Vegetarian, and a lot of it from the mountains. For 1,000 years, these mountains were the home of the Yamabushi, the wandering priests who practiced a mysterious esoteric religion, neither Buddhist nor Shinto. They were sorcerers, shamans, the guardians of the mountains and the priests of the dragon gods. And even in the middle of winter, they say you could hear the sound of the conch echoing from the distant mountains. It's unlikely, I suppose, that such people still exist. But if they do, I'd love to meet one. Pinwheels, spinning in the breeze to soothe the souls of dead children. When people die, their spirits flit to the top of high and holy mountains. And Mount Haguro in particular is a gathering place for the souls of the dead. This little graveyard must be full of ghosts. So many bereaved parents have come here and lovingly clothed the tombstones in their dead children's clothes, and left toys and dolls here for them to play with. Some bring new clothes and new toys year after year. It's almost unbearably poignant. Feeling heart, says this sad little t-shirt. I have a feeling that something good is going to happen. Over the years, hundreds and hundreds of people have brought prayer sticks to plant here, each written with a prayer and the name of their dead, so that they can rest in this holy place.
So the Shinto no関係？仏教の
仏教。
仏教。とこういう国でいいですか？
そうそうね。
あ、そう。
体全部。
体全部。意味は何ですか？
お線香っていうのは、仏様に言わせると人間は非常に臭い。
臭い。
臭い匂いがする。だからお線香で清めると、
清める。
仏様に同じ匂いがする。
この宮司さんですか？
いえ、お勤めしてんのね。
こういうふうに。
そうそう。
Tonight, clouds still obscure the top of the mountain. Kobayashi, my new friend, thinks that tomorrow will be fine, and even now the clouds are beginning to clear. So finally, I'll be able to climb Gassan, Moon Mountain, and see the sacred shrine on Yudono, the third mountain. Kumo no mine ikutsu kuzurete tsuki no yama. Cloud peaks endlessly crumble away on Moon Mountain. As Kobayashi predicted, the next day is crystal clear, with just a touch of frost on the ground. A perfect day for climbing Gassan. And better still, I discover that I've managed to track down a Yamabushi without even looking. Kobayashi himself, who, as it turns out, is not a Shinto priest, but a member of this enigmatic sect. He's a sort of protector of the mountains, and from time to time he has to sound his conch to drive off evil and evil spirits. It's a fantastic feeling, enormously exhilarating, walking on the mountain early in the morning, with half of Japan, or so it seems, spread out at my feet. I must confess I'd been rather dreading walking this rugged mountain on my own, so it's a great relief to have Kobayashi to guide me. But he's far from just a mountain guide. He's fitted me out in pilgrim gear, a mulberry paper necklace for purification, and a bell in case I get lost. The journey's only just beginning, and we're already way above the tree line, so high that there's even an aeroplane below us. Everywhere I go on these sacred mountains, there are cairns, little piles of rocks heaped by the wayside. Kobayashi says that they're built by the souls of dead children, maybe for play or maybe so that they can climb towards heaven. But every night, demons come and knock them down. So to help the children, I add a rock to the pile and say a prayer. Of course, the one thing I hadn't bargained for was snow, and the higher we go, the deeper it gets. Here on the mountain, we're close to the sky and close to the gods. There are so many gods that they can't be counted. In the rocks, in trees, in waterfalls, in caves. But the most powerful of all are the mountains themselves. The Yamabushi are their ministers. They live on the mountains, tend the shrines of the mountain gods, and carry out ascetic practices to absorb the power of the mountain into themselves. In the summer, they act as guides for the many pilgrims who come to worship here. But in winter, they are the lords of the mountains. They stride the snowbound slopes, praying at every shrine, ensuring that the gods are happy and the wheels of the universe continue to turn. So, even though the snow is getting deeper and deeper, and the whole project is beginning to strike me as distinctly foolhardy, there's no chance of turning back. But I suppose you have to struggle if you want to meet God. My hands are numb and my feet are freezing. I can't imagine how Kobayashi manages in his cloth shoes. By now we're way above the world, heading for one of the most sacred of the Yamabushi places. Up here on this majestic peak, it's easy to believe that the mountains are gods and to feel their power. Kobayashi tells me that his father was a Yamabushi, and as the oldest son, he followed in his father's footsteps. He says he's just a simple man with a job to do, fields to till, and a wife and children to support. But to me, he's far more than that. It's almost as if he embodies the power of the mountains. And ahead of us is Mount Yudono, the mysterious third mountain. But we're not there yet. The worst is still to come.
これからはしごだからね。
はい。
石落とさないでよ。
はい。ちょっと待って。はい。あ、これ取ってくれますか。はい、ありがとう。はい、こっち。 Well, if I ever regretted coming on this journey, I certainly regret it now. Of course, I'd forgotten that going down is a lot worse than going up. My legs are shaking so much that I'm wondering if I can make it to the bottom. Not that Kobayashi seems much bothered. But then, he's a mountain man. He must have done this journey 1,000 times. And worst of all, I have to trust my fate to these dreadful, ancient, rusty iron ladders that look as if they're about to pull out of the cliff any minute. For the life of me, I can't imagine why I made this journey. Someone as cowardly as me should be tucked away safely at home, not stranded halfway down a mountain. But I guess I'm not in it for the climb. And I suppose when I do get to see the sacred shrine at Mount Yudono, it'll be all the more stupendous for this ordeal. Further down, we pass a sacred waterfall, and I've heard that in the old days, the Yamabushi used to bathe here. But I hadn't been planning on a cold bath myself. Kobayashi insists that it's essential to purify ourselves before we approach the innermost shrine. A thoroughly bad idea as far as I'm concerned. But despite my protests, we end up sitting in the icy water, pure melted snow, straight from the top of Gassa. The idea is to concentrate on chanting so as not to feel the cold, though it's all I can do just to carry on breathing. This is actually one of the most famous of the Yamabushi practices, and no doubt, once I'm back in the warm and dry, I'll be grateful for the experience. As if we weren't purified enough already, we have to wash out our mouths and rinse our hands with pure spring water. This is the final blessing. Now I'm ready. It's said that I'm going to the holiest of all places. It's said that what I am to see is the Godhead in physical form. We collect our last remaining sins and impurities on scraps of mulberry paper and throw them all away. Cleansed of sins, we pass through the last gate and finally go to encounter God. Katorarenu Yudono ni nurasu tamoto kana. Mount Yudono, of which I may not speak, wets my sleeve with tears.